Senator Harris, do you think Mr. Humphrey possibly will take a more dovish stand on the Vietnam War after he is nominated, if he is nominated?
I don't think it's a question of a more dovish stand. I think he will feel freer to speak his mind when he's not restricted by the office of the vice presidency. Now, there's always some question whenever he speaks out as to whether or not that's some trial balloon for the administration, or whether he is speaking for the administration or signaling some new position by the administration. He's more vice president in some ways in that regard internationally than he is a candidate. But after he's nominated, I think he'll be far more candidate than a vice president, and he'll be freer to speak whatever his mind is on Vietnam or any other subject, in my judgment.
How do you feel about the big Republican push on the law and order issue?
Well, I think that this is a country where there's a great deal of fear, and people are angry and they're fearful, and I think that's a terribly dangerous kind of thing. I think black people are afraid of white people are afraid of black people, police are afraid of citizens are afraid of police, young afraid of old afraid of young. It's a very dangerous kind of situation. I think Mr. Nixon has clearly decided that he's going to play upon that fear, and that he's going to run a campaign of division and a campaign of fear, and that may be the way that you could go to be successful. But I think
Mr. Humphrey going to beat Mr. Nixon?
Mr. Humphrey will beat Mr. Nixon, but the reason he'll beat him because we'll be running a politics of reconciliation. Mr. Nixon has clearly shown he doesn't want any Negro votes, and I think that everybody ought to ask himself, how is a man going to continue the dialogue and put himself in a position to put this country back together again when he's been elected by appealing to people's darker and deeper kinds of fears and baser instincts? Vice President Humphrey's not going to do that. He's going to practice the politics of reconciliation, and I think, therefore, we'll be better able to put this country back together again.
Organ transplant operations in the future may be governed by a set of laws. At least that's the job of a special legislative committee formed by House Speaker Ben Barnes. The committee's job is to take measures to protect both the citizen and the transplant surgeon. The University of Texas Southwestern Medical School in Dallas is the front runner in trying to establish some criteria to protect those citizens. At present, there are no laws in Texas, or the nation either for that matter, pertaining to organ transplants. 1/3 of the world's heart transplant operations have been done in Texas, and one of these in Dallas. I talked with Representative Fred Orr of Dallas, one of the 9 members of the committee, about their plans. Representative Orr, do you feel personally that some type of legislation will come out of this committee that will further the advancement of organ transplants?
Mike, I feel very, very strong in those lines that this committee will resolve and write into our statutes some legal guidelines to help solve some of the problems legally that the doctors and the general public are experiencing revolving around organic and specifically heart transplants. And I feel very fortunate and I'm very pleased to be on this very significant committee because it has a very important role to play in the future of political science and political medical advancements.
What are some of the problems that you and the other members of the committee anticipate in your investigation?
Some specific problems, of course, are going to be the varying degrees and the varying attitudes that different doctors and different schools have in regard to organic transplants. Not every school, as anyone can imagine, will all have the very same attitudes.
The committee is due to report to the 61st General Assembly of Texas in Austin next January. If they're successful in their attempts to establish legislation, they may also establish a precedent for the rest of the nation. This is Mike Moss, Channel 8 News.
I don't think it's true. The President of the United States made I thought, a very courageous, a very tough kind of decision to remove himself from the political scene. And in order to help bring peace in Vietnam, he made clear that his own political future was secondary to peace in Vietnam. It's a very serious decision to make. I take him at his word, and I do not expect, as a matter of fact, I don't think there's any chance that he will change his mind.
Are you predicting a Humphrey victory on the first ballot?
Yes, I think Vice President Humphrey will be nominated on the first ballot.
Senator Harris, the polls seem to tell us that Senator McCarthy is actually the most popular Democratic candidate. Why do you think the Democrats are going to select Mr. Humphrey?
First, they don't show that. The polls continue to show that among Democratic voters, Vice President Humphrey is the overwhelming choice. And
I'm speaking among all the voters.
Well, you see, first you have to be nominated, and this is not the election yet. The election will be in November. This is the nomination of Democrats, and the polls show that Vice President Humphrey is the overwhelming choice of Democratic voters.